Pine won both heats in order to qualify for the main point score. Most expected a close tussle between the Australian champ and current series leader Bob Brewer, but disaster struck just 3 laps into the event. Four of the 6 cars were severely damaged in the pile-up, and it was a credit to the pit crews that only one was unable to return to the track. That vehicle was driven by luckless Brewer, who was forced to play spectator as Pine held off a desperate challenge from John Brown to take out the final. A protest is still pending though, and the results won't be official until a hearing is held early next year.
The tournament was a first for Newcastle and the locals responded in brilliant fashion, showing glimpses of some outstanding raw talent.
I think these guys will do really well in a couple of years, and when the skills get better and the pros come down and teach them a bit more, I think we'll be doing really well.
The amateurs will get that chance when the Nescafe Pro Circuit hits town next weekend. Today's performance drew an interested group of volleyball fanatics, but the pro show should see the masses flocking to Newcastle Beach.
The skill level between the amateurs and the pros is huge. Being a pro myself and playing a lot, you go down the beach every day and train 4 or 5 hours a day, otherwise it's not worth it.
The only player with professional experience in today's tournament was Paul Mounter Jr, but after winning 7 games straight, his team faltered in the final against Nicholas Arnold and Adam Bear. Meanwhile, in Newcastle itself, flames engulfed derelict shops in Hunter Street West. The alarm was raised around 2:30 this afternoon. Firefighters were on the scene within minutes, but there was little they could do except ensure the flames didn't spread further east. Balls of flame were fanned by a howling westerly wind, and resources were stretched to bursting point and beyond.
The brigade resources at this time are stretched to the absolute limit. I have had to order several units back from the Edgeworth fire. They have been replaced by bushfire brigade units from Lake Macquarie, but we did have to bring reinforcements back into the city area.
The sound and lighting warehouse where the fire is thought to have started was destroyed, and the adjoining building suffered severe smoke and water damage. It's not yet known what caused the blaze, but scientific police have been called in to sift through the embers, and foul play has not been ruled out. Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
This house on the western shore of Tuggerah Lake was hit by a fireball and gutted within minutes. Nearby, the Matthews family had lost everything.
There was nothing you could do, it's just get out of the place, save your life. The heat was just too intense to do anything. There's nothing you could really do.
I'm trying to find something in the fire.
Neighbours took up a collection to replace Christmas presents. Firefighters have been powerless to stop the advance of 2 fires overnight, at best battling to save lives and houses.
We were given about 5 minutes warning to get out. A car pulled up and said, your house will go, and all we could do was go for our lives.
By morning the war was won, but an army of firefighters was kept busy with spot fire skirmishes.
Well, we thought everything was looking good, but unfortunately we got a breakout again.
Helicopters bucketed water from the Wyong River, which the fire had leapt twice during the night. Houses were also lost at Umina and flames funnelled from a fire in the Brisbane Water National Park to the steep valleys of Pearl Beach. The community rallied alongside fire brigades to save many houses, but others were beyond rescue. The hills flared again in the early hours of the morning. Residents evacuated to the beach. A fire tanker rolled on a steep bend, its injured crew lucky to escape before the wreck was engulfed by flames. The fire threat to the Central Coast remains serious, but spot fires in the worst affected areas should be contained by nightfall.
Beaumont Street, Hamilton, and all is calm, but just 12 months ago things were chaotic. Hamilton was one of the areas hit hardest by an earthquake that measured 5.5 on the Richter scale. It is also one of the areas that have led the recovery. From the rubble that was once the old Kent Hotel has risen a building that is now the showpiece of the district. Elsewhere, the city is doing its best to dress its wounds. The Junction Motor Lodge was shaken to its core by the quake. It was declared unsafe and subsequently demolished, but a new commercial and retail centre is planned for the site, and while it's being built, this mural will continue to add a touch of colour to the suburb. Other demolition work was the subject of much controversy. Vacant sites are now all that remains of the George Hotel, Carrington Chambers and the York wing of the Royal Newcastle Hospital. The demolition of the Junction School brought with it another tragedy. A workman was killed as an unsafe wall was demolished. Also rising from the debris at the junction is a new Prince of Wales hotel, said to be a near copy of the original early 1900s structure. Just 9 days ago, Governor-General Bill Hayden unveiled the foundation stone for what will be the new Newcastle Workers' Club.
My great pleasure to formally begin construction of the new Newcastle Workers' Club, an important symbolic development in Newcastle's fight back to restore its economy and its social structure fully and adequately.
The reconstruction of the club is seen by many as a vital psychological step for the city. It was the scene of both horror and heroism in the hours after the earthquake struck. 9 died trapped in the ruins of the building. Emergency service men and women worked frantically for hours on end to free as many people as possible. Nurse Leslie Elvin worked alongside ambulance officers inside the club for most of the day. Yesterday, her efforts were acknowledged when she received a Meritorious Service Award, but the memories of that harrowing day stay with her.
I think it was traumatic for everyone, but yes, we had a lot to think about and a lot to do that day. It was one of the most traumatic, mentally and physically. You're reminded of it all the time, so I think we're all still trying to get over it.
Another to be hailed as a hero was Norm Duffy. He lay pinned in the ruins of the Workers' Club beside his dead wife, but still found the courage to comfort those who were trapped nearby. He was yesterday made the first recipient of the Regional Superintendent's ribbon and citation for valour. Norm is a survivor, but admits his life will never be the same.
Well, I still think of it, you know, because everywhere you go, you know, like you see different, you know, like scars, like a battlefield, you know, buildings and that, and I'm at home now. I was stopping at Mayfield with the oldest son for a few months, and I'm home now, and everything reminds you more of that day than ever.
His is not an isolated case. University research has shown those worst affected by the quake are still suffering from the shock.
People that had a lot of earthquake experience, who were in situations where they might have been injured or they had disruptions and losses, people who scored high on those situations are showing levels of psychological distress that are quite high. They're compared with other Australian disasters, they're as high if not higher. People that were not exposed to any of those situations are showing levels that you would expect to find in any community at any time.
Lord Mayor Alderman John McNaughton says that's to be expected and is pleased with the way the city has bounced back.
You'd have to be pretty hard to please if you weren't more than satisfied with what's happened from every citizen. It's been a remarkable joint achievement.
Still, he has very definite ideas about where we should be another 12 months along the road to recovery.
I'd like us to be well engaged in the routine work of rebuilding our city and getting the damage repaired. The insurance companies are for the first time saying the payout figure is going to be over $1,000 million. So far, the work that's been done is only about $150 million. There's a long way to go to get the actual work done, and I really have a target that by this time next year that all that work will be underway, it'll be well organised, well ordered, and people will know where they're going. It won't be finished, but it will be well organised and we'll know where we're going, and that's what I hope to see in 12 months.
Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
Salvage vessel Flinders Tide docked at Newcastle for just a few hours early this morning to offload its cargo. A wing and other components were quickly placed under wraps and whisked away to RAF Base Williamtown. The Mackie jet fighter crashed on November 19, about 25 kilometres southeast of Foster. The pilot, 31-year-old Flight Lieutenant Russell Page, was killed after ejecting from the aircraft. Witnesses said a wing appeared to separate from the jet before it went down. The entire RAF fleet of 70 Mackies has been grounded ever since. Beachgoers and fishing craft were asked to keep a lookout for wreckage, but in the end, high technology proved the answer. The Flinders Tide was contracted to send a remote-controlled submarine to the site. These pictures taken by the remote vehicle show clearly the wreckage of the jet 120 metres below the surface. In this view, the parachute from a second ejector seat billows in the current. At the top right of the screen, the aircraft serial number is identifiable on the shattered fuselage. The air crash investigators were able to pick the pieces they wanted to examine in detail and bring them to the surface. The wing section is now washed in fresh water and coated with a protective layer of oil. Search leader Group Captain Richard Gregory says the operation was a complete success.
We were lucky in that when we found the wreckage on the bottom, or we found some wreckage, that there happened to be a ship available that had the capability to go out there and use a remotely operated vehicle to investigate closely. And that was very fortunate for us that we could put our hands on that at fairly short notice.
The investigation will now move from the hangar to the laboratory.
They need to examine it with electron microscopes and all sorts of sophisticated equipment. Obviously, it's very small detail that they're looking for and certainly not visible to the naked eye.
Do you feel they will find a cause?
Yes, I'm quite sure that they'll find the cause and we'll fix it up.
An initial result could be known within a matter of weeks. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
and strengthen perspective. I love the story of the 3 people who were interviewed a month or so after our earthquake.
Newcastle has a lot of catching up to do this New Year's Eve. Last year there was no reason to celebrate. Instead of seeing out the 80s in a blaze of colour and partying, its streets remained dark and desolate as it licked its wounds from the earthquake that had hit 3 days earlier. This year, however, is expected to be a vastly different story. All venues are predicting they'll have wall-to-wall revellers by midnight. Down on Queen's Wharf, the complete sellout of every available seat has prompted plans for extra marquees to be set up along the waterfront to handle liquor sales to as many as 10,000 expected there. In response, the city's police will be out in force.
There'll be a lot of uniformed police around tonight. There will be detectives, there'll be beat police, there'll be even water police. We'll have the police boat out on the harbour for those little devils who like to have a quick swim in the harbour, and we have to look after them too. So there'll be water police, there'll be police from just about all our areas in Newcastle working tonight.
Extra bus services will be operating in a bid to keep people moving in and out of and around the city. As well, every available taxi cab will be on the road. But despite the huge numbers predicted, Inspector Ian Cleary is expecting a trouble-free night.
We don't really expect any trouble. The people are very good in Newcastle and we don't expect any of them to misbehave.
Canton Cafe owner and chef Peter Wong was preparing a takeaway meal and his wife Emma was manning the counter when the bandits struck, just after 8 o'clock last night.
The man came in, one hand closed the door, one hand used the long gun pointing to me. I was very scared and I can't do anything. I was screaming, just screaming, can't do anything, be scared.
Peter immediately rushed to the counter, brandishing a large spatula and spoon, and chased the young man outside. The bandit stripped off his stocking mask and left it here at the phone booth before being hotly pursued up the street by Peter with the cooking utensils. It was here that Peter lost him, but this morning police recovered the gun, an air rifle. A coat belonging to the bandit was also found in the doorway of an adjoining shop. The attacker is described as around 17 years old, dressed in army-type camouflage clothes. In Charlestown in the early hours of this morning, a would-be robber aged in his 20s threw a bank-style money bag on the counter of the Caltex service station and demanded money. Although the bandit was armed with a small knife, the attendant jumped over the counter and a scuffle ensued. The bandit escaped, leaving the attendant with more than a dozen minor cuts to his forearm. The attacker was wearing a black balaclava, a white T-shirt, black track pants and white joggers.
As the sun set on another year and another decade, 50,000 people crammed into the city centre, the majority of those on the harbour foreshore. A high-profile police presence checked the crowds from the water's edge to the city streets. Police reported a well-controlled celebration with only 10 arrests.
Happy New Year, everybody.
In Cooks Hill, a special celebration looking back to New Year's Eve 1989. A year ago, Novocastrians bravely faced the new year, stunned by Australia's worst earthquake.
Portable college to the work, Hamilton 10. Yeah, Hamilton 10, just the location of that port tracking on that. To the corner of Denison and Beaumont Street, Exchange Hotel.
It was a double celebration this year, with revellers planning for sparkling times. At the brewery, patrons drank 100 kegs of beer. That's more than 6,000 litres, while countless thousands of litres were brought in by the crowds. This morning, the foreshore was littered with papers, cans and smashed bottles. Council workers took away 4 truckloads of garbage. For most, however, today was a day of recovery, rest and remembering those New Year's resolutions.
Make me number one, sweetie, me main sweetie.
Oh, you're not going to give up the grog or the cigarettes or something?
Not at all.
I'd like him to. I'll make a New Year's resolution for him to give up the smoking.
No more alcohol. Completely none whatsoever, I hope.
Okay.
It was 1 in all in at Blacksmiths Beach today as the Mini Mercers put the finishing touches on their preparation for the Australian titles. New South Wales will go into the event as defending champions, and 2 of the Newcastle boys will be back to make it 2 in a row.
We managed to beat Queensland by 1 point, but we hope to beat them by more this year.
For Dean Little and Adrian Tobin, the stiffest competition will be familiar. They'll both contest the 11 years board and swim events and have definite ideas about who'll come out on top.
Hey.
For Merryweather's Greg Ebrell, the experience will be a new one, but he's confident he can use his speed off the mark to leave the opposition with a face full of sand.
Oh, I haven't been to the Nationals before, but I've been told that Queensland's tough competition.
How do you think you'll do though?
I'll give it my best shot.
The competition begins at Glenelg on January 13.
The ANL carrier, the Sea Road Tamar, was the last order on the books for Carrington Slipways when the Commonwealth Bank stepped in and appointed agents to wind up the business. 70% complete, the roll-on, roll-off vessel is due for launch in April. ANL has leased the shipyard, taken over the project and offered all union employees 6 to 8 weeks' work on casual rates. Workers will be hired as required after that. While this will add significantly to the cost of the vessel, ANL continues to have faith in the Newcastle workforce.
We believe it's been a very good yard. It produces an excellent product and has been quite a good asset to Newcastle.
Is it important to you to maintain the cooperation of the workforce?
Oh, extremely important, and I think the last few days that we've been here, we've had a very cooperative attitude from the workforce and their representatives, and we hope to maintain that all the way through.
At a mass meeting of workers at the yard today, receiver Greg Hall announced that all wage entitlements would be met. Deductions such as those for health insurance would be made good in a week. However, the workers learned that annual leave and long service entitlements amounted to almost $2 million and could not be paid until the yard was sold. And the meeting became heated as workers learned that no assurances could be given on redundancy pay. The company's assets were advertised for sale in major newspapers today, but a shipyard with orders becomes a more attractive proposition. Trades Hall Secretary Peter Barrick says there are prospects in the pipeline and has called on the federal government to assist the yard in winning new work.
We understand that there's tugs, a cement carrier, and certainly Carrington were negotiating a contract with Yugoslavia for wave-piercing passenger ferries. They were very much near to conclusion, and we just think it's a tragedy that they hadn't been allowed to pursue those prior to this closure.